This is an interesting discussion. We have the words of warning coming from Shukracharya, who is ostensibly the spiritual master of Bali Maharaj. He's in the position of guru. Now, as we will come to see in this text, that Bali Maharaj ends up acting independently of this advice. He ends up acting from his heart and not heeding this warning. And for this, he is actually glorified, of course, we see. So we can say that in this sense, Shukracharya, though his guidance is very sober and his guidance is based in Shastra, he is not giving advice according to the full scope of the situation. We see that ultimately surrendering to Krishna, surrendering everything, as is so beautifully exemplified by Sri Bali Maharaj, that we only stand to benefit from this ultimately, though it can be very fearful. It can be very fearful for us. And in this sense, these words coming from Shukracharya, in many ways, they mirror the voice that we hear from this material world, voice that we hear from all of the influences around us, and also internal voices that we confront as we continue to make progress on our spiritual path. We have these warnings, we have these fears of don't give in too much. You can do a little bit, that's nice, but don't give in too much because you may lose everything. You know, from a material perspective, we have this fear sometimes. So also Srila Prabhupada's purport here is so beautiful in that it's directly laying out how we should aspire to offer our material resources to Krishna. And it's a very high bar, but there's a principle there of whatever we have, we should offer. Of course, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita speaks in this way. Whatever have, whatever you give away, whatever you offer, whatever austerities you perform, do that as an offering to me. Of course, I'm paraphrasing, but this is Krishna's message for all of us in Bhagavad Gita. And also, we're encouraged to only accept what is necessary. So we see an interesting balance here that we should offer quite liberally to Krishna. We should offer our resources in a way that is predominantly focused upon our Krishna conscious life, our advancement in Krishna consciousness. And we should understand that everything that we have belongs to Krishna. So Sri Ishopanishad illustrates this very beautifully in mantra 1. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrita kasya svidanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So in here we find this beautiful dual recognition that everything is coming from Krishna, and as a result also we should not be miserly, we should not be hoarding Krishna's resources. We should accept what we need and not less than that. No, we don't, our line, we don't encourage any kind of artificial renunciation or dry renunciation. We should accept what is required for our service, but sort of no more, no less. And similarly in Nectar of Instruction, Upadeshamrita, we have Atyahara Prayasascha Prajalpo Niyamagraha Janasangas Chalodyamcha Sadbir Bhaktir Vinashyati. These are 6 things that stand to place our bhakti at risk. They can destroy bhakti. And the first one mentioned is Atyahara, which means accumulating more than necessary. So this is a balance we have to consider here in understanding about offering our material resources to Krishna, that We should give whatever we have. We should try to give as liberally as we can. Of course, the standard here demonstrated by Rupa Goswami is 50% toward Krishna consciousness, 25 for oneself and 25 for family or loved ones. So it can be very difficult, but at the same time, we need to also remember that we're not encouraged to over-accumulate. We need to accept what is there for us as our quota, and then try to offer that. So in this day and age, it feels very hard sometimes when we hear figures like this, percentages like this. For many of us to divide our income in half in any way is practically insurmountable. But we need to aspire toward this, recognize that this is the highest standard. And if there's some way that we can attain that, then that is very much desired. But also we're working with the principle here. So we're warned against acquiring too much, but at the same time, we want to offer everything we can according to who we are and according to our particular karma, our particular circumstances, and our abilities and gifts and our nature. So we need to recognize this principle and apply it according to whoever we are, whatever our situation is. So we have a beautiful example that is cited from Ram Lila, Ramayana. This is kind of a folk story. It's part of, Ram Lila, though, in a greater way, that we hear sometimes a spider and we hear sometimes a squirrel. But when Hanuman and all of the monkeys and all of the very esteemed associates of Lord Ram are building the bridge to Lanka, they're dropping massive boulders, enormous mountains and boulders into the sea to form this bridge. And at the same time, we hear of a little spider, or sometimes they say squirrel, who is kind of very enthusiastically kicking sand into the water, grains of sand, and they're falling into the water. And of course, sand will sink. It won't remain, at the surface. But at the same time, Lord Ram recognizes, and Hanuman recognizes the intention that they're doing everything that they possibly can. Their endeavor is unparalleled in the sense that it's on the very same level as those who are hurling gigantic boulders into the sea, because they're doing what they can according to their size, according to their situation, according to who they are. So we should never disparage others for what they're trying to offer in Krishna consciousness according to their present circumstances and according to their life situation as given by Krishna. So we can all participate, we can all do our part, and sometimes we may feel that we have very little to offer. In this case, we're speaking about financial contribution, but just in general, we may feel in the way of service or in the way of, spiritual discourse, whatever it may be, we may feel that we don't have so much to offer. But at the same time, we should be in the spirit of, Krishna, you've given me whatever little bit you've given me, I want to offer it back. I want to fully offer that and render that so that it can be an expression of gratitude for all that you've given. So there's so many different ways to make offerings in Krishna consciousness. This is one of the most beautiful things about Bhakti, that we can all participate. There's always a way for us to use our particular gift or our particular inclination for the pleasure of the Vaishnavas, for the pleasure of Krishna, for the pleasure of our spiritual masters. And it's our endeavor. It's our endeavor that's ultimately pleasing. In Bhagavad Gita, this is repeated that, we should not be attached to the results of what we do, but rather to the process. So if we're sincerely engaged and really giving it our all, then surely this is pleasing to the soft-hearted devotees and to Srimati Radharani and to Lord Krishna. So, yeah, this is the principle. We give what we can. The contribution, the actual result may vary very widely, but we're given so many heartening, inspiring examples of how this is kind of a secondary consideration, the result. How magnanimous, right? In the material world, by material standards, it's all about the result. It's all about the final product. You can spend years and years laboring on something, but if it doesn't bring the desired result, it's practically worthless by a material standard. The voice from that will be, well, nice try. Maybe, that's even a charitable perspective. If someone says nice try, they'll say, well, you didn't do what we asked for. Try again, or we'll give it to someone else. This material world can be very brutal in that way. But how beautiful that in spiritual life we see that God is looking at our intentions. The devotees are looking at our intentions. And this is our real wealth. This is so uplifting that we can be seen and understood in this way, that we can really offer our heart's intention. And of course, we pray for a good result. Of course, we try our best to make as nice of an offering as we can. But ultimately, it's about our intention. And this is what God sees. So in the age of Kali, we find that this is a time where we need an egalitarian spiritual process, something that we can all approach, because otherwise there are so many material discrepancies. So many of us are at a material disadvantage, and this is why, in Treta Yuga, 2 ages ago, the primary process for spiritual realization and for worship was homa, a very elaborate fire sacrifices, like we see in the temple, when there's an initiation or a wedding, but something infinitely more complex and opulent than that. And it had to be executed perfectly. Every word of the mantra had to be pronounced perfectly, and everything had to be offered the highest quality. Otherwise, it was considered to be practically, it didn't have the desired result. So in this age, how can we afford, right? So many people would not be able to afford an opulent, majestic offering like that for the Lord. And also, many of us are not sufficiently qualified to offer these things perfectly. So we find that in Kali Yuga, things are opened up for us by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the form of Yuga Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan. Anyone can chant. It doesn't cost anything. It's completely open. There are no hard and fast rules. No matter where we are, no matter what our circumstance is, pure or impure, we can chant the holy name, and we can receive tremendous spiritual benefit and really cultivate our connection with the Supreme Lord as he's fully present in his names. So, and for this reason, actually, Kali Yuga, the Srimad Bhagavatam states, here I'll read this, this is a nice passage. Srimad Bhagavatam actually states that Kali Yuga is worshipable. So I'll just read the English here. Those who are actually advanced in knowledge are able to appreciate the essential value of this age of Kali. Such enlightened persons worship Kali Yuga because in this fallen age, all perfection of life can easily be achieved by the performance of Sankirtan. So this is a beautiful point, how, we may feel that Kali Yuga is so fraught. Of course, it's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. No getting around that, no denying that. But by the same token, the mercy that is extended to us in Kali Yuga is unsurpassed, because it's understood that we really need all the mercy we can get. And Lord Chaitanya opens the storehouse of bhaktis, giving freely. So in the past, perhaps if we have some aspiration for bhakti, we have some aspiration to connect to the Supreme, then some reciprocation may come. But in this age, Lord Chaitanya doesn't even consider whether we want it or not, doesn't even consider whether we're looking for that. Lord Chaitanya wants to extend love of God to anyone and everyone, regardless of qualification or even of their personal disposition towards spiritual life. So, going back to this question of wealth, this question of offering what we can. So, of course, Shukracharya is warning, don't do it. This is not advisable. And, from a material standpoint, of course, this is true. Of course, from a material standpoint, we can say that Bali Maharaj lost everything when he surrendered to Vamanadev. But like we find, Dhruva Maharaj is another beautiful example, that he was seeking a kingdom. And once he finally had the darshan of Lord Narayan, he said, this is nothing. Why was I after this measly kingdom? Why was I looking for this tiny little broken glass, compared to the diamond that is love of God? So it's interesting. I was thinking about how in our scriptures and in our line, some give up their wealth. So we have the example of Lord Buddha. Lord Buddha, of course, was in a kingdom, was a prince, but gave everything up to attain spiritual realization, renounced everything. And Srila Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, also came from very, very wealthy, prestigious backgrounds. They gave up everything to go be with Lord Chaitanya and to live as Goswamis, wearing nothing but kopans. Very simple, simple, simple life. Real deep renunciation. Also, Srila Narottam Das Thakur, he was also a prince, and he went on to also just leave it all behind. Although later on he returned to his local place, his local village, and shared everything that he had to offer with the local people. But at the same time, he really did leave behind this sort of materially opulent existence. At the same time, we have many examples of people who acquire wealth and use that in Krishna's service. A classic and beloved example is Sudama, Krishna's friend Sudama, who is a very, very poor Brahmin who approaches Krishna with nothing more to give than a small bag of chipped rice. We hear devotees explain that this chipped rice was maybe not even in the best condition. It might have been spoiled, might have been old. And he offered this to Krishna with his full heart. And Krishna ended up giving him very, very opulent, palatial living situation, because Krishna understood his heart, that he didn't want that, wasn't what he was after at all. But at the same time, in reciprocation, Krishna lovingly bestowed that position upon him. And this just improved his ability to worship and to love Krishna as a friend. So Dhruva Maharaj also, ultimately, he realizes that he's not after a kingdom. He only wants the love of the Lord. But at the same time, he ends up receiving very, very opulent kingdom, his own planet from Krishna. So if it's offered, it's really, there's no loss. It's still perfect. So much of the spiritual merit of these circumstances are based on the spirit in which it's offered. So in our particular cases, if we are able to acquire wealth by our fortune, by our karma, or by our circumstances, and we offer it lovingly to Krishna, then that's perfect. We don't have this sense that, if you're more austere, then you're somehow more spiritually advanced. It doesn't have to be that way at all. We have beautiful examples on both sides. And Srila Prabhupada also gave so many practical and beautiful examples of this in his own personal pastimes, that he didn't reject things that he could use in Krishna's service. Of course, we have many examples of him living extremely simply. He would sit at his trunk. He would keep his trunk for his belongings, and he would sit there and use that as his desk and do his translations there. So this is beautiful. This is simplicity. At the same time, though, he used a dictaphone. He used a machine to record his purports. And at that point in time, that was quite a modern piece of technology. And it was kind of like, like if we would use, our computers or, whatever the latest gadgets are. Srila Prabhupada was not against that. He didn't say, I'm a sannyasi, I'm a sadhu, I can't touch these things. He saw that this is for Krishna's service. Of course, whatever I can use in Krishna's service. Similarly, there were times when his disciples would lovingly, pick him up in a very fancy car, in a Rolls Royce, something along those lines. And someone, a journalist, criticized Srila Prabhupada about that, actually. They said, why are you here in a Rolls Royce if you're a holy man? And Srila Prabhupada said, why should I not have it? Why should I not have it? We're trying to serve God. We're trying to serve Krishna. So I don't see this as mine. I don't see this as something that is for me. It's for Krishna. And, his disciples sincerely did that as an offering, so he accepted it. So this is really the principle, active principle of Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada exemplified. We don't turn things away based on our own taste or our own materialistic idea of what is spiritual or not spiritual. It's really a matter of, can we offer this to Krishna? Can we use this in Krishna's service? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, he explains that we should accept whatever is favorable for Krishna consciousness. We should reject whatever is unfavorable. So this is really, it requires sincere contemplation, and it requires quite often, input of senior devotees, of course. But we see that, we have to be really honest about our own circumstances, and we have to look at things very clearly and think about, will this help me to serve? Or will this hinder me? And for each of us, according to our nature, these things may be different. Gaur-Sharan Prabhu may be able to, serve in a particular way with a particular material situation, and this is perfect for him, and he can make a full-hearted offering to Krishna based on these circumstances. Whereas maybe for me, it would be very challenging, or it would distract me. We have to be very honest about what works for us and how we can really make the offering, and we should accept and reject accordingly. Just wanted to share also a very powerful example of, we can never judge by the material circumstances. We have a very powerful example of Pundarik Vidyanidhi in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Pundarik Vidyanidhi was an associate of Lord Chaitanya who lived a very opulent lifestyle. He lived in a mansion with beautiful couches and soft beds and lamps, and very, very opulent. Like if you imagine now, like crystal chandeliers, everything was at the height of material opulence. And Gadadhar Pandit was brought there, and they said, we want you to meet a very advanced devotee. We want you to meet an amazing Vaishnava. And when they got there, Pundarik Vidyanidhi was reclining on like a velveteen couch. And he was sitting there, and he was like in full luxury. And Sri Gadadhar Pandit, he passed some judgment. He said, it doesn't seem like this is an advanced devotee. He's living in such a materially opulent position. So then the devotees who were there with him, they said, no, just see, just look. And then they started to speak about Krishna's pastimes. And they told the story of Krishna and Putana, that Putana was a demoness, and she was out to kill Krishna. And she tried to kill Krishna by feeding him poison breast milk from her breast. And they're telling this story, and then they say, how wonderful, how incredible that despite all of this, Krishna actually fulfilled Putana's deepest desire of lovingly serving Krishna in the mood of a mother. She didn't even know that this was her desire, but Krishna still fulfilled that, even though she was trying to kill him. And when they told this part of the story, Pundarik Vidyanidhi became completely ecstatic and overwhelmed with love. And he started rolling around and flailing his body and exhibiting ecstatic symptoms. And as he did this, he was knocking over all of the crystal lamps, and he was breaking all of the fancy furniture, everything. And then the devotees, Gadadhar Pandit was humbled and realized, oh, this all means nothing to him. This is just his material circumstance. This is what Krishna gave him. And he's completely absorbed in love of God. He's just accepting the circumstances that Krishna gave him. So as all of these things were strewn about the room and breaking, the devotee saw, oh, this is really just something he's accepting. It doesn't mean anything to him. It's not important. And Gadadhar Pandit ended up begging Pundarik Vidyanidhi to initiate him. And Pundarik Vidyanidhi did so, initiated him with love. So with an example like this, we can see that we just try to remain steady in our own predicament, and we don't judge others for what their material situation is. The real ultimate principle is to offer to Krishna. Whatever Lakshmi is there belongs with Narayan, of course, belongs to the Lord. Lakshmi and Narayan are inseparable. Otherwise, Lakshmi is very flighty. I believe the Sanskrit word, Gorsharan Prabhu, maybe you know, chanchala, is this right? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adipurusha Prabhu. Yeah, so chanchala means Lakshmi runs here and there. She goes where she pleases. The only certainty is that she's always with Narayan. So in this way, we try to cultivate our spiritual life, and we trust that wealth, whether it's spiritual wealth, material wealth, whatever's required, will come our way. So, you know, we just ask ourselves the question of, you know, are we doing what's required for our service? Are we moving toward a sustainable spiritual life? And are we becoming increasingly detached from matter, whatever matter may be there, and increasingly attached to Krishna? This is really the litmus test, rather than what we have or what we don't have outwardly. So our ultimate goal, of course, is the spirit of Atmanivedan, offering everything that we have. And Bali Maharaj is the exemplar of this, as we'll see in this pastime, that he offers everything to Lord Vamanadeva, including his own self. And this can be scary at times. We have all of these Shukracharya-like voices all the time saying, you know, you'll fail if you do this, you'll die. Everything will fall apart and you'll be miserable. But if we just serve in our own way, and we have so many beautiful examples, I just want to, you know, thank each and every one of you. Adipurusha Prabhu, also, I just have to say, you know, the way you've served for so many years and trusted that Krishna is going to take care of you. You know, this is a beautiful example. And, you know, we need to really focus on that. How can we make an offering? How can we do this? And just trust that all of the wealth that we require for our own self, whoever we are, that will be there in its own way, whether spiritual or the material resources. And Srila Prabhupada says in a lecture in 1973 in Auckland, he said, so by giving to Krishna, by serving Krishna, by loving Krishna, nobody is a loser. Everybody is a gainer. So with that, thank you all so very much.